So, yesterday, in my ongoing quest to expand my inventing and, just general making stuff capacity, I made a little number 10 can knife forge out of Perlite, which is basically just rock styrofoam, and this stuff, high temp stove and furnace cement. You can make it with a concoction of plaster and what is it, silicon, no, it's sodium silicate, something like that. If you can make that stuff, but I don't know how to make that, so I just got it's basically the same stuff you end up with. Let me just read that here. Yeah, sodium silicate. It says it right on there. Contains sodium silicate. So you can make this, basically this kind of stuff, if you have sodium silicate and plaster. But I don't know where to get just sodium silicate. I don't know how to make it. I don't know anywhere around here that has even the equipment and materials to make it. But there is a place around here that sells this stuff, so I got this stuff. Making this took almost an entire 5-liter bag of perlite and just over half of this 1 kilogram or 946 milliliter. It's actually measured in liquid, even though it's a paste. But anyways, yeah, this, almost half of this, or just over half of this, and almost an entire 5-liter bag of perlite. As I was watching this set, it occurred to me that the design is very similar to that of a rocket stove. If you don't know what a rocket stove is, you will shortly. Essentially, what you have is a tube with a chamber underneath it, holes in the bottom. So you set it up upright like this, you put burnable stuff in there, you set it on fire, the air comes in from the bottom and goes up, and you can cook over top of that flame. Makes it very efficient to have a cookable wood-fired cooking solution in camping or survivalist situations without having to set up an actual whole campfire. So it occurred to me, as I was watching this set, that I could make a teeny tiny one out of an old bean can. So it's basically the same thing. You get your perlite, you get your hole spacer. I'm going to use the same one I did for the knife forge, because the camping stove, the little rocket stove here, isn't going to get as hot as that one is, so it doesn't need as much insulation armor on the sides, but it does still need to have some. So this way will have about a 1.5 centimeters all the way around of perlite armor, which is more than enough for this. But first, what you have to do is drill in the air holes, and you're going to have to put something in those while you're forming it that you can then take out after the whole thing is solidified, or shortly before it's solidified. Same with this. Actually, you have to take this out before it solidifies so that it'll stay there and not bond to this. So, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to use these old feet from the steel shelves as the spacers for the holes. Since I have 4 of them ready to go, I'm going to make 4 holes. Now obviously if you use a step drill you can get that much cleaner. I don't have one of those, so I just got to do, you know, I guess got to make this with what I have. There we go. They're not perfectly spaced, but they don't need to be, so it's fine. Next step is we mix up the perlite and the cement there. This stuff is left over. It crusted up on the sides of the container I was mixing in, but it's still fine. It'll bond to itself with the with the cement and the perlite. This stuff will bond to it, so I'll just mix that in with the stuff I'm doing here. You can put a little water in the previous, your little bits there if you happen to have any left and you're doing another project. You can put a little water in to loosen them up, reactivate it. The water will evaporate. And there we go. That's the entire bag, 5-liter bag of perlite. This was $5 at the hardware store. And it's like 5 liters. This is a bag of 5 liters of this stuff, and it weighs practically nothing. It actually says on the lid to open it with a coin. I don't have one handy, but this thing will do. Alright, so I got this stuff open. It's more of an ordeal than you'd think because the lid is super sealed. I actually had to use this thing to pry it open. Anyways, you can see in there, it's gray and it's goopy. It's about the consistency of your pre-made plaster. So you just grab a decent sized handful and you mix it in with your perlite. And you get this goopy styrofoam and mud textured mixture here. And to start this process, you just take some of that and you put it in the bottom to create a nice flat platform. And you got to tamp that down. And the lid of a spray paint can works. And there we go. Nice and flat for the most part. Now, you got to put in your air hole spacers. And you got to make sure they don't interfere with each other, but that they touch each other so that the air channels don't get clogged up with other stuff. Now, you'll wonder why I'm wearing the big long gloves. It's because this can get messy. Alright, now you face the challenge, of course, of getting this thing filled up through the sides here. You'll notice it's a kind of a narrow gap in there. It was hard enough on the big one. It's going to be very difficult on this one. But if you take like this is the tube from a roll of string, slice it down the middle and use it as a chute, that might work. So that's what I'm going to try. This is going to be tricky no matter how I do it. There we go. You scoop it into this and then you tip it into the can. Okay, so we've got up to about that level, but we need to tamp it down. I'm going to use this little piece of rosewood that I've cut away from my other projects. You can see those videos, but can't really do anything with this piece. It's just too small and oddly shaped, so I'm going to use it to tamp down that. Alright, so there we go, and that's fairly tightly packed now, and it's got a lot more space on the top there, so hopefully this altogether will be enough to properly fill that. Okay, so there's the basis of your Perlite rocket stove. Right there. Yeah. Good and solid. And you got all of this tamped down. I didn't have enough to fill it quite up all the way to the top, but that might actually be better that way. If you're going to be having cooking stuff on top of it, you're going to want a grate there. You're going to want some air, you know, to be able to flow out around, so it's not just cooking right up the middle. Too much friction on this tube here. It's not coming up cleanly like it did on the last one. No, okay. This is just going to have to stay in here until it sets, and then I'll pull it out. Same with all these bolts. I'm just going to have to stay in there until the whole thing is set. Press that down as much as I can with my thumbs. And then I'm going to let that set, and once it's set, then I'll pull it out. And we'll see how that all turns out. Okay, so I have recently extracted the center tube filler as well as all the bolts I used for the smaller air channels. And now we have this. See if I can get a good angle on that with the air. The light coming through there, you can kind of see that in the air hole there. So what we've got here is your basic rocket stove. Now the inside, I know you can't see that really well because of the constraints of the light, but the inside there, it has a bunch of crevices in it, which I was expecting. The same as the big one has. And while it's probably okay if it's like that, I prefer to have that as smooth as possible, seal them up, just in case there are any that reach all the way to the outside of the can. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some of this, some more of this, with some water, just plain old water to thin it out, and then work it into the insides of that, just to make sure that that's all coated and filled in. I'm going to do that on both of them. And to keep it from getting all over the place, I'm going to be taping up the holes on the outside with this. Now, the big one only has the one hole for the torch, so it only needs one. This one's got 4 holes and they're a little more ragged. The material in the can is thinner on this one. So I had to do that several wraparounds. Now I'm going to mix the cement with the water. Alright, so now we've gotten it all this soupy consistency here. And you just pour a little bit of it, not quite in the center, just a little off center in that. And we tip it almost upside down there, and it went right to the bottom, and it got into all the crevasses down at the bottom, but it's not going in the rest of it there. I'm going to have to work it in with my fingers. That's okay. I kind of expected as much. Alright, so that's all like that. Good there. I'm going to set this aside to drip dry from the inside. And then this one gets a slightly different treatment. Now this one I made about 24 hours ago. So it's been setting a lot longer than the little one. This one needs that time to set because it's going to be dealing with a lot higher temperatures and a lot more extreme durations of temperature. The little one isn't. The little one's just going to be wood fire going upwards. This one is designed to contain the heat and direct it inwardsly, like into this cavity, to facilitate forging knives. So this one needs a lot more, it needs a lot more attention to protocol, I guess would be the word. And then let that one drip dry like that into that bucket because there's a lot more in there. I don't want that all over the counter. This one is mostly dry, so the little bit that's going to come out isn't going to be that much of a problem. But this one here it's got a lot more in there, so I want it to drip into something. I've also got it on a slight angle away from the tube so that that can also drip farther inwards and then out the top. There it goes. That's better. Okay, so there we go. That's the final step of both of these processes. I didn't bother filming the main process for this one because it's been done. There are plenty of instructionals about this on the internet. Where I got the idea to do this was from one of those instructionals, so just look them up, they're everywhere. Just, you know, coffee can forge is generally what they're referred to, so. The original idea I had, as a result of making this, was this. So this video is about making one of these, little rocket stoves with the perlite and stove cement. So, I'm going to let this cure for 24 hours, and of course I'm going to let the big one cure for another 24, so that all of this that we applied now is going to set and be good. And then I'll give them both a small fire cure, which is required to get the things, you know, to make sure everything cures and stays exactly where it is permanently when you start using them for the thing that you're actually going to use them for. I'm going to poke a hole in the tape on that one because it doesn't seem to be flowing as well, probably because it doesn't have an air relief above it. So solve that problem real quick, poking a hole in it. Nope, there it is. There. Alright. So I'll see you again when I'm ready to cure these with a fire. Okay, so here I am. I've made this. I did a fire test of this. I ran the burner for a little while. I turned it over and made sure I got the entire interior surface with this. I didn't film this because there's not really much point. But one thing, I tested this one with the fire. This is the one that I actually filmed being made. And it took a little while to get it started, but once it did, it was really good. Good solid flame coming up there. You could have cooked over it. I didn't because I was just doing a set burn and a test burn, but it works. It works quite nicely. The outside got warmer than I would have liked, but not crazy warm. Like, you can pick it up with a pair of gloves. It's fine. But something I discovered when I was testing this one is, I kind of knew this would happen, but I was hoping I could avoid it. The legs are just a little bit too short, so it rolls about a centimeter. So I'm going to build myself a little platform out of some scrap plywood that I have for these legs to sit on, so that they will be extended about here and sit nice and solid. So that's my project for today. Okay, so there's the basic design. It's not perfectly straight, but it doesn't have to be. Basically, the feet will sit here. The nuts will sit outside of that channel so that there's an air gap between the can and that, because the can did get a little warm. Don't want to risk an extra long burn charring the feet, so that'll work. Now I just need to make sure that it'll stay there. I'm thinking just some metal brackets on the side here will do that just fine. Well, I have a slight problem. I can't find enough of a strong enough metal to do that. So I'm going to have to come up with some other fix for that problem. I'm thinking it might actually be better on the next one if I just drill the appropriate sized holes for the bolts into the wood instead of cutting out channels. If that works, I may just remake one of these, and we'll see how that works. So I realized my secondary plan, it also wasn't going to work because I wouldn't be able to get the things in there at those angles just slotting it in. But if I sandwich these together, that'll go in. And that creates a workable fit. So I'll sandwich these together, and I'll do the same thing on the other side, and then I'll bond them together with something going in between this and the back. That ought to work. My next project, making a better mounting system for that lamp. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work quite nicely. Okay. Alright, so now that I've got this set, I need to work out the distance I need to traverse with the crossbar here. There's stuff in this again. 105.32 millimeters. So 10.5 centimeters basically. And what's the gap? .35 millimeters, so 3.5 centimeters apart. Approximately on both of them. Wow, I eyeballed that and got really close to what I expected. That's pretty good. I've been doing this way too long. I'm getting too good at eyeballing stuff like that. So that means I was going to split this down the middle like that, but with the spacing the way I've got it, doing that wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have given me enough space on each one. So I'm going to have to cut two of those sections and then cut them both down a little bit. That's okay, I can live with it. Alright, so just cutting about 1.5 centimeters off here. Alright, that'll work quite nicely. Next, I need to map out and drill the holes for the screws, because you can't screw into plywood, especially this way, without drilling first, because it'll split the whole thing, destabilize it, won't work. So you gotta drill. Alright, now all I gotta do is attach it with screws. So there's that. It's not exactly pretty, but it'll work. You can tell it's not perfectly even there because of the way I stenciled it out. But that's fine. It still has plenty of buffer. This one is, like, the one in front here is the one that I messed up. It should have that ridge there, so whatever. It's fine. It'll still work. And there we go. It's not pretty, but it works. This thing will keep this I wonder if that'll work. Alright, so there we have it. This platform will keep this thing from rolling around, keeps it fairly steady. I'm going to have to flatten the bottom up, but that's okay. That's fine. It's a 5-minute job later. I'm not going to do it on video. So that's good. So I got this thing here. You hook this up to a hose, which hooked up to a propane tank. Same kind of thing you'd put on a barbecue or whatever. I would definitely recommend just getting longer nuts, or longer bolts. If I knew I was going to have to do this, I would have gotten the 2.5 inchers instead of the 2 inchers. So yeah, make sure you get long enough bolts so you don't have to do this. But if you find yourself having to do this, this is the easiest way to do it. You've got this here. Got a nice air gap in there, so you can see through it there. So yeah. And that's not going anywhere. Hopefully the next video will be actually making a knife in there. But before I do that, I'm going to have to mount this exhaust fan thing that I've rigged up into my exhaust vent that I've also rigged up. I'm not going to bother making a video out of that because it's not really going to be very interesting. But that's my next job. So until I'm making a knife, farewell.